picture this, right? It's September 1977,
Okay.
and it's just pouring rain outside this prison in Marseille, France. Beaumet's prison.
Oh, wow. Setting a mood right away.
Yeah, totally. So there's a man sitting on death row, and he's mere hours away from facing the guillotine.
Which is terrifying.
Right, and it's a massive media spectacle because, well, this is about to be the last real state-sanctioned beheading in history.
Yeah, a huge historical moment.
Exactly. But inside that cold cell, his accomplice isn't like praying for a pardon or anything. He's meticulously calculating the exact milligram dose of blowfish venom needed to paralyze his friend's nervous system.
To fake his death.
Yes, to fake his death. And today's deep dive is into a story that starts with that kind of cinematic historical tension and then completely shatters every single expectation of where a narrative can actually go.
I mean, the sheer audacity of that setup is just brilliant.
It really is.
So for you listening, we are looking at a stack of sources centered around a novel. It's called Ships in the Night by Carol M. Mottershead.
Yeah, part of the Elixir Chronicles.
Right. And it manages to take these hyper-specific factual historical events like, you know, the grim reality of the guillotine in 77 and the shocking death of Elvis Presley and collide them with this centuries-old underworld of immortals.
And if you're hearing this and thinking, oh, okay, sounds like a fun fantasy romp, you really need to brace yourself.
Yeah, it gets dark.
Really dark. Because this narrative uses those fantastical elements to tackle something intensely grounded and horrifying, which is the psychological and physical reality of domestic abuse.
It's intense.
It is the definition of genre whiplash.
Which is exactly why we need to unpack how those two worlds operate. Grounding the impossible in the precise mechanics of history is what makes the emotional payoff of this story work so well.
So let's start at that prison in 1977, Death Alley in Marseille.
Right.
The historical anchor here is the execution of Hamida John Dubey, which actually happened.
Yes, the very last time the guillotine was used in France.
But the author uses this chilling milestone as a smokescreen for a fictional crisis. Sitting right alongside John Dubey is a man named Pulcinella, and he's staring down the blade.
But Pulcinella has a secret.
Right.
He's immortal.
Which is a problem if you're about to have your head chopped off.
Exactly. The immediate mechanical problem there is fascinating. Because if you are immortal, what actually happens when a massive steel blade severs your head?
Do you regrow a body?
Right. Or does your severed head just stay conscious indefinitely in a basket?
Ugh, horrifying.
Yeah, and the narrative doesn't even want to find out, which is why the fake death is so necessary. But the bigger question this raises is the origin of that immortality.
Right, where'd it come from?
It all stems from a historical secret guarded by an ancient group called the Phylax, who later evolved into the syndicate known as the Custodics.
The self-professed protectors of medicines and poisons.
That's them.
So, okay, let's unpack this. My understanding from the sources is that they possessed a divine healing elixir. It was originally transcribed by a dying monk.
Yeah, centuries ago.
But instead of sharing it, they buried it. I mean, it's like the ultimate pharmaceutical conspiracy theory hiding the cure for everything just to keep selling snake oil. But it backfires into a curse of eternal life.
What's fascinating here is the economics of that decision.
The economics.
Yeah, think about it. If you have a monopoly on the medieval medical trade, your entire power structure relies on people being sick, right?
Oh, sure.
They have to be desperate, reliant on your treatments. A literal cure-all doesn't just put you out of business.
It destroys your leverage in society.
Exactly. They hid the elixir because curing humanity was just bad for the bottom line.
That hoarding of power is a theme we're going to see echo in some really dark ways later on in the story.
Very dark ways.
But the formula doesn't stay buried forever. We have Perenelle, the wife of the famous alchemist
Nicholas Flamel.
Yeah, and she discovers the dying monk's scattered notes in her husband's bookshop.
Yeah.
And her motivation is the exact opposite of the Custodics.
She's altruistic.
Totally. She just wants to heal the sick parishioners in her community.
Her altruism is profound, but the biological consequences of her actions are just tragic. She spends years deciphering these ingredients, but she lacks the precise chemical proportions.
Right, it's not an exact science yet.
No, it's guesswork. So when her first husband falls deathly ill, she gambles. She administers this makeshift potion.
But it works at first, right?
Initially, yes, it triggers this miraculous recovery. But then a catastrophic biological failure occurs, and he dies suddenly.
So, devastated, she locks the formula away.
Naturally.
But years later, her subsequent family with Nicholas ends up taking it when they were on their deathbeds.
When there's no other choice.
Right. And this time, it doesn't kill them. But it doesn't just heal them either. It essentially locks their biology in temporal stasis.
The mechanics of their immortality are essentially cellular stagnation.
Cellular stagnation.
Yeah, if your cells stop dying, they also stop growing. You are frozen in whatever developmental state you were in when you ingested the elixir. So they can't age, but they also can't evolve. They are forced to live on the fringes of society, constantly faking their deaths.
Changing identity so the mortal world doesn't notice they look exactly the same decade after decade.
Precisely. Which brings us to the most extreme example of this biological entrapment.
Nikki.
Nikki is a 400-plus-year-old immortal.
Right.
But because he was given the elixir as a toddler to save his life, his aging process was slowed to a microscopic crawl.
So he was a kid for centuries.
For centuries, the world perceived him as a child. Only now, in 1977, does he finally inhabit the body of a young man in his 20s.
And our introduction to Nikki is straight out of a nightmare.
It really is.
He wakes up inside a freezing, pitch-black stone crypt somewhere outside Rome.
The sensory deprivation of that scene is intense. He's buried alive. And he realizes he ended up there because of a violent altercation with his father, Pulcinella, back in Paris.
Right. Pulcinella essentially let Nikki fall out of a high-story window onto the pavement. And since he can't die, someone found his broken, comatose body and entombed him. So to escape, Nikki has to rely on mesmerism.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize that because mesmerism sounds like a cheap parlor trick.
It totally does, yeah.
But the way his mentor Arthur taught it to him is highly scientific. It's about conscious control over the autonomic nervous system.
I want to dig into that. How does that actually work?
Think of it like the real-world Wim Hof method, but taken to an extreme biological absolute.
Okay, the ice bath guy.
Exactly. When a human is trapped in a crypt, the sympathetic nervous system triggers panic. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, and you burn through your limited oxygen supply in minutes.
Right, you'd suffocate so fast.
Right. But Nikki uses these cognitive techniques to intentionally override that panic response.
Wow.
He manually slows his heart rate, drops his core body temperature to preserve metabolic energy, and channels his adrenaline strictly into muscle strength to shatter the coffin.
It is just a phenomenal feat of survival. But, Nikki's family history of survival gets even stranger.
Oh, it really does.
Going back through the centuries, Nikki's parents, Joan, and the aforementioned Pulcinella, they survived by being traveling street performers.
Yes.
And the sources reveal they are the actual historical inspiration for the classic Mr. Punch and Judy puppet shows.
The historical context here adds such a rich, disturbing layer.
Yeah, tell me about the monkey.
Right. So during the Napoleonic Wars, this family found themselves in England. And the xenophobic paranoia at that time was absolute.
People were terrified of the French.
Exactly. There is a very real documented historical legend about the coastal town of Hartlepool. The townspeople found a shipwrecked monkey dressed in a miniature military uniform.
A monkey.
A literal monkey. And having never seen a Frenchman or a monkey before, the panicked locals held an impromptu trial.
Wait, a trial?
A trial for the monkey, and they hanged the animal on the beach, convinced it was a French spy.
You read a historical detail like that and it sounds absurd, but it really highlights the sheer terrifying danger of being an outsider with a strange accent in that era. I mean, if they would hang a monkey, what would they do to an immortal French family?
Exactly. To survive that lethal environment, Joan and Pulcinella had to disguise their origins.
So what did they do?
They relied entirely on mime, and Joan utilized a tool called a swazzle.
A swazzle?
Yeah, it's a small metal reed device placed at the back of the palate near the uvula. When you speak through it, it completely distorts the human voice.
Oh, producing that high-pitched, raspy, squeaky sound associated with Mr. Punch.
That's the one. They literally masked their identities to avoid execution, turning their terror and desperate survival tactics into a slapstick comedy routine.
Fast forward to 1977, and that trauma is still echoing. Nikki, this former street performer, is trying to find purpose.
Right.
He's reinvented himself as an alternative therapist. And his primary patient is none other than Elvis Presley.
Of all people.
I know. Nikki has been working with him, trying to use those same mind-body techniques we talked about to get Elvis off his mountain of prescription drugs. But then Nikki is sitting in a cafe reading a newspaper and sees that Elvis has died.
The irony is deeply tragic. You have a man with all the time in the world, an immortal who cannot die, desperately trying to buy just a few more years of life for a mortal who is chemically destroying himself.
Yeah.
It underscores the profound isolation of Nicky's existence. He outlives everyone. The women he meets, the friends he makes, they are just ships in the night.
Hence the title.
Exactly. He is trapped in a moving current while his own biology remains entirely static.
Think about the psychological whiplash here for the listener.
Hmm.
How does a guy process being a 400-year-old street performer who is secretly the therapist to the king of rock and roll while dealing with a father who literally treats him like a child and throws him out of a window?
You really can't process it, which is why he's so isolated.
And that concept of being trapped is the perfect bridge into the second half of this narrative. Because the author takes that feeling of inescapable entrapment and suddenly drops you into a scenario that has absolutely no magic, no immortality, but is entirely terrifying.
Yes.
We shift to Paris, into the life of an aspiring investigative journalist named Dorothy. And Dorothy's life is a masterclass in the mechanics of coercive control.
The transition is jarring, but thematically, it's flawless. We move from the grand, sweeping entrapment of immortality to the intimate, suffocating claustrophobia of a modern apartment.
Usually people use that cliche of the frog in boiling water to explain this kind of abuse.
Yeah, that's the standard analogy.
But that analogy always feels a bit hollow to me. I think it's much more accurate to look at it through the lens of sensory adaptation.
What do you mean?
Like if you walk into a room with a strong perfume, your olfactory receptors are overwhelmed. But stay in the room for 20 minutes and your brain adjusts the baseline. You literally stop smelling it.
Right, your brain normalizes it.
Exactly. Dorothy's boyfriend, George, a frustrated bank supervisor, manipulates her psychological baseline in the exact same way.
Sensory adaptation applied to threat detection. That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Okay.
George doesn't start with physical violence. He starts by subtly recalibrating what Dorothy perceives as normal.
Right, he critiques her ambition.
Yes, and then comes the financial abuse. He storms out after arguments, deliberately taking the last of their shared cash.
So she has nothing.
So she is forced to dig through her purse for stray coins just to buy a baguette. He creates a manufactured dependency.
And once that new baseline is established, the escalation begins.
Yeah.
He throws a plate of food at her head simply because the dinner lacks salt. And his ability to manipulate reality after these outbursts is just staggering.
It's terrifying.
During one argument, he sets the newspaper she's reading on fire, exploiting her known phobia of flames.
Which is just so cruel.
In her panic, she accidentally scratches his eye. George then goes to the hospital, sits calmly in front of the triage nurse, and lies, claiming a stray dog scratched him.
That specific lie is a calculated weapon.
Oh, absolutely.
By acting calm and framing the injury as a random accident to the outside world, he weaponizes her guilt. He forces her into a state of cognitive dissonance, making Dorothy question her own sanity.
She starts to wonder if she is the volatile one.
Right. It's a systematic dismantling of her reality, and the moment he secures a long-awaited promotion at the bank, he uses his perceived elevation in status to come home drunk and sexually assault her. It is entirely about dominance.
It is, and the morning after that assault contains perhaps the most chilling sequence in the sources.
Oh, the kitchen scene.
The kitchen scene. George is in the kitchen, making breakfast, acting completely cheerful. The threat detection system is completely scrambled for Dorothy.
Because he's acting like nothing happened.
Exactly. When Dorothy states she has to go to work instead of celebrating his promotion with him, the mask drops instantly. The rage returns. It's like that. Later, during a confrontation near the stove, he deliberately tips a cup of boiling hot coffee onto her arm.
And Dorothy's reaction in that moment is fascinating. She doesn't scream. She doesn't cry.
No.
She grabs a vegetable knife from the counter and presses it directly to his throat.
What we are witnessing there is the primitive activation of the survival instinct.
Yeah.
When pushed to the absolute brink, the mammalian brain bypasses emotional reasoning.
So she's not just angry.
No, she doesn't feel hot, chaotic rage. She describes feeling an icy clinical numbness. Looking into his eyes, she calculates that she is physically and mentally capable of ending his life.
Wow.
The realization that he has pushed her to the precipice of murder terrifies her more than George himself.
And this grounded domestic horror story connects back to the immortal world in a very profound way.
It does.
Dorothy receives a physical dossier in the mail at her newspaper office from Joan Nicky's mother, the original Judy from the puppet shows.
Right. Joan is furious about how history has misinterpreted her legacy.
because society views Punch and Judy as slapstick comedy.
But Joan reveals that her public performances were always meant to be desperate warnings.
Warnings.
Yeah, it subverts the entire cultural memory of that medium. Joan's letter argues that the shows were designed to communicate with victims who were too terrorized to speak.
Yeah.
By putting the violence on a public stage, she was saying, "This behavior is not normal. If you see Mr. Punch hit the baby or strike Judy, you must yell. You must alert the constable."
But they didn't.
The tragedy is that society, instead of intervening, laughed. The crowd normalized the violence, turning domestic brutality into entertainment.
That is deeply unsettling.
It's a dark mirror reflecting how easily society ignores the horrors happening behind closed doors, just like George's abuse of Dorothy.
So we have these two incredibly tense narratives, right? An immortal family fracturing under the weight of centuries, and a journalist realizing she might have to kill her partner to survive.
Yeah.
How do they physically collide? It all comes back to Death Alley in Marseille.
Dorothy manages to convince her editor, Jeremy, to send her to Marseille on a long-shot assignment. She wants to investigate the bizarre behavior of the prisoner, Pulcinella, who refused to mount any legal defense against the guillotine.
And Nicky's also there, standing in the pouring rain among the protesters.
Despite the fact that his father nearly killed him by throwing him out a window.
Right. But the sheer weight of their shared eternal isolation brings Nicky to the prison gates to say goodbye.
But inside the prison, the scheme we mentioned at the very start is unfolding.
The Blowfish Venom.
Right. Nicholas, the patriarch, infiltrates the execution staging area disguised as a priest giving last rites. Arthur, the physician, is also embedded. Nicholas manages to slip Pulcinella a highly precise, calculated dose of tetrodotoxin.
Blowfish Venom. So how does that actually work without killing him?
The pharmacology of tetrodotoxin is terrifyingly specific. It acts by physically blocking the fast voltage-gated sodium channels in nerve cell membranes.
Okay, in English.
This means the brain can no longer send signals to the muscles. The diaphragm is paralyzed, heart rate drops to an almost undetectable flutter.
Oh, wow.
But crucial to this plan, it does not cross the blood-brain barrier effectively. The victim remains entirely conscious and aware while their body perfectly mimics clinical death.
That is horrifying. So he's awake while they think he's dead.
Awake and fully aware. And the sheer mathematical precision required by Arthur is astounding. Miscalculate the dose by a fraction of a milligram, and Pulcinella either metabolizes it too quickly and wakes up on the chopping block,
Yikes.
or he suffers irreversible tissue damage, which is a massive unknown for an immortal biology.
But the math is perfect.
It is perfect. The prison officials, horrified that a high-profile inmate has seemingly died of cardiac arrest just hours before the spectacle of the guillotine, quietly authorize the removal of the body to avoid a media scandal.
They rush him out in an unmarked white ambulance.
Oh.
And Dorothy and Nicky are standing shoulder to shoulder in the press scrum when that ambulance speeds through the prison gates.
They both instantly recognize that the official narrative is a lie.
Right. And Nicky, utilizing his perfectly preserved cognitive recall, casually memorizes the license plate of the fleeing vehicle.
NP0007FX.
NP0007FX. In the chaotic aftermath, freezing and exhausted, Nicky and Dorothy retreat to a nearby cafe. And the dynamic between them is a stark, striking contrast to Dorothy's life with George.
It's completely different.
They end up sharing a small hotel room simply to sleep. They fall asleep fully clothed, wrapped around each other for sheer, desperate comfort. There is no coercion.
Amen.
The next morning, they share a very tender, deliberate kiss.
It is a moment of pure, unguarded gentleness, something Dorothy's nervous system hasn't experienced in years.
So what does this all mean? I have to play devil's advocate here.
Okay, go for it.
Dorothy barely knows this guy. On the train ride back, he actually confesses that he is a 400-year-old immortal, which she understandably writes off as a bizarre joke.
Because of course she does.
Right. So is this a genuine romantic connection? Or is Dorothy just grasping at a life raft because she is drowning in George's abuse?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, looking at the psychological architecture of her character, it is less about Nicky as a long-term partner and more about what his presence catalyzes within her.
Okay.
Nicky is the antithesis of George. He doesn't seek to control her reality. He validates it. When he gives her that license plate number, he isn't just giving her a clue.
He is handing her the leverage to reclaim her professional agency.
Exactly. He represents a momentary, breathable escape from her timeline.
And she uses that leverage brilliantly. She takes the license plate back to Paris, proves to her editor that the vehicle wasn't registered to any legitimate local hospital, and blows the cover up wide open.
It's a huge scoop.
Huge.
Yeah.
That single piece of evidence secures her 2 months of guaranteed funding and an expense account. She forces the paper to invest in her, fundamentally launching her career as an investigative journalist and giving her the financial independence to finally walk out on George.
The narrative arc is incredibly satisfying because she rescues herself. The fantastical elements merely provided the key she had to turn the lock.
It is a phenomenal journey. We started by exploring an ancient alchemical elixir that fractured the laws of biology, detoured through the tragic, isolated reality of 1977 pop culture, and ended up deep inside the harrowing psychological mechanics of escaping domestic control.
And if we take a step back and look at the thematic connective tissue of everything we've discussed today, there is a fascinating parallel between the macro and the micro forms of oppression.
Oh, how so?
Think about the ancient custodics. They hoarded a miracle, a literal cure for human suffering. They suppressed it entirely to maintain their wealth and their structural control over a vulnerable population.
Right, they monopolized salvation.
Precisely. Now look at George on the micro level. He hoards Dorothy's finances. He systematically destroys her self-esteem. He isolates her from her support networks, all to maintain his petty, tyrannical power in their apartment.
It's the exact same mechanism of control.
Merely scaled down from a societal level to a domestic one. It forces us to look at the structures around us and ask, where else in our modern society are resources, cures, or basic human freedoms being quietly suppressed simply to maintain the comfortable status quo of those in power?
Wow, that is a deeply unsettling yet vital question to carry with you. Understanding the mechanics of control is the first step in dismantling it. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Until next time, keep questioning the baseline of your reality, and remember that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't buried in ancient crypts. They're the ones calmly making breakfast in the kitchen.